I'm going to start with a really funny story. It's funny to me. Might not be funny to everybody else, but this is how this actually all started. My best friend, Mike McCool, and I, we were both working at the time, and I was working in TV, and he was doing some stuff here and there. And we both started getting laid off at the same time. We both started getting our hours cut. And so he and I really started reconnecting with each other just over bikes. So we started riding bikes all over the city with no real purpose in mind. And then in true adult fashion, we also bought a PlayStation 3, and we started playing a lot of Call of Duty. So Mike and I, we're going through all these things. Sorry if I keep moving. This is how I do my thing. Mike and I are like sitting around, we're playing video games, riding bikes. And one night I looked at him and I said, is it pathetic that two 30-year-old dudes, all we do is ride bikes and play Call of Duty? He looked over at me and he said, bikes and murder, man, bikes and murder. Ding! That is the real start of all of this. So I said, man, that sounds so cool. And so I'm like, let's make a shirt and try to sell that, like to make some money. Mike's like, hey, man, whatever, I got a screen printer at home, let's do it, man. So we print these shirts, and nobody buys them. My mom's like, I can't wear that. It's got murder on it. I can't wear that. She's like, you got to change the name. So we're like, you know what? We're not going to change the name, because at the time we weren't trying to be this huge thing. We just wanted to create something for our friends that would bring us together. Okay, that was it. No big deal. Well, shirts didn't sell, and then we started trying to come up with other ideas about how we could get involved in the bicycling community, because at this time we had fallen so in love with riding and everything that we were doing. We were like, we gotta get involved. Well, there were all these other bike rides going on, and it wasn't that we didn't like them, but they just weren't us. Okay, there's other rides where people come out in this community, they might litter, they might disrespect the city, and we weren't into that. So we said, let's start our own thing. We don't even care if anybody comes. Let's just go out, ride our bikes, we'll guilt our friends into coming, and that'll be enough. So Mike looked at me, and we were actually, also at the time, really into red wine. And after drinking a lot of it, we decided that we would start a bike ride. So we started Slow Roll, and that's precisely right when we started it. We're like, we need to make something that's slow, that everybody feels welcome, everybody can come to, and it's not about spandex and looking, whatever. And so the first day, there were 3 of us. We stopped at the store, we got a bottle of wine, which I'm not encouraging anybody to do on a bike ride. Stopped and got a bottle of wine, we rode around, there was 3 of us, and I think that season we maybe had 10. And that's because I lost half my friends because I was yelling at them for not coming. So I had more friends, but then they stopped being my friend. It's a long story. So 10 of us that year are doing our thing, and I ended up meeting this guy named Hal Williams. Hal was probably 62 at the time. He just came to us, just clicked, like out of nowhere, just started riding. Older dude, lights all over his bike, speakers, the whole nine. And we're like, who is this guy? Ended up like building this incredible relationship with him. And he taught me that what we were doing while we were riding our bikes is we were actually showing people that it's safe to do. Because a lot of people think in Detroit you can't ride a bike, you're going to get whatever, or somebody's going to hit you. He's like, you're showing people that it's something safe to do, and you're showing them parts of Detroit that they would have never seen. Okay, we are the Motor City. So when you're in your car, I call them the glass bubble. Everybody gets in, you start your car, usually maybe turn on the radio. That's the only communication really you have, unless your cell phone rings, which you're not supposed to answer or text. So we were like, we got to get people out of the bubble. Well, the first year ends, and this is all tying into this thing, because all day, every speaker that we had here had something that touched me. So we talk about the evolution. Well, Mike and I, we knew we had this ride, and we knew we wanted it to get bigger. So we said, what can we do to keep people engaged over the winter? Okay, we could keep riding bikes, but the numbers aren't going to go up. So we said, let's have like an auto show, but for bikes. Like, I'm like, I know 5 builders, I know a couple guys that work at shops. I'm like, let's have a little show. So we called this venue, and we end up booking like a 400-room space, and we end up selling this thing out, okay? And this guy comes to me, a friend of mine, Cullen, who works at the shop, and he says, I think you guys are onto something here. I think you guys could do something a little bit bigger. And so we went home, and we said, okay, let's think about that. But at the same time, the new slow roll season was coming up. So we're getting ready for it, and up until that time, we were at the same venue every week. What we did is we started at a place called the Woodbridge Pub. We would start there and come back. Our friend Jim owned it, and we thought it was a good idea to bring people back to his restaurant because he needed money, so let's get him some food and drink. Well, I have another friend named Vaughn, and he called me one day and he said, do you love me? I'm like, yeah, dude, what's up? I mean, yeah. He goes, well, why don't you bring those people to my bar? And I said, why don't I bring those people to your bar? So that was the first evolution of Slow Roll. We decided that what we would do is go to a different bar or restaurant that needed our help, that might not even be open on a Monday, because once again, our ride's on a Monday. I don't know if I told you guys that. It's kind of crazy. And so we started moving. The first week, we had like 50 people. Now, remember, the year before, we had 10. And I'm like, where are these people coming from? And so my friend Dante's like, well, what's happening is they're telling their friends, and they're telling their friends how much fun they're having, and they're bringing 2, 3 people. So we went from 40. The next week was like 150. And I remember my friend looking at me and going, what are you going to do when it hits 1,000? I said, that's never going to happen, dude. There's not that many people in this area or this region that would come out and ride a bike on a Monday night. Well, I was wrong on that. I lost a little bet. So it went from 100, and I think we topped out at 4 that year, okay? So we top out at 4, we move around, and then that's when I get the call from Ted, okay? And I'll be honest, I knew what TED was, but I didn't know what TED was, you know? I immediately started trying to write this crazy speech. I got a tutor, true story. For 2 weeks, I walked in front of my laptop, timing myself and talking into a camera. I went there and I did it. And I saw a lady that I used to work with, the YMCA, and she said, you ready for your speech? And I'm shaking and sweating, and she goes, just come from your heart, baby. Just come from your heart. Threw the speech out, went out there. I had 12 minutes. They actually ended up extending me and giving me 15. Apparently, we did well. Apparently, we did. 500, 600 people, like the first day. And we're like, I remember calling a meeting with all what I would call our squad. Squad is the people that keep, all the people you saw in the yellow shirts that keep people safe. I remember calling those guys aside and I said, hey man, look, we got to decide something right now. Do we get out? Because this is crazy. Or do we take responsibility for what we've built and evolve and push it forward? So we decided to do that. So we kept going. We came up with our code of conduct, which a lot of rides don't have, which are 11 rules that we feel are pretty common sense. Like I said, don't litter, don't disrespect your neighbor, don't disrespect the city. So we came up with that. And all of a sudden, people started writing us about how awesome it was that we cared and that our ride was about the city. And it was about bringing people and bringing positivity to the city. Well, we were feeling really good, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, every Monday, we're running from the cops. Let me be honest, we were running. I don't know how, 500 people. Every Monday, I'm looking over every corner like, please don't be a cop. So that year ends on a pretty high note. We do TEDx, and like I said, we come back, and all of a sudden, Detroit is just all over us. We're in every publication, every news station, and everybody's all over us. And at this time, we had actually done a show to back it up. Remember I told you how we did the first show that we did was the small 300-person show. And this is kind of another funny story. I know you guys are all excited to get to the bar. But so Mike, my partner, was actually working at Cobo Center in Detroit, the biggest convention center in Detroit. And he was laying carpet down. And he didn't notice he was actually ripping it up as he was laying it down. And so the GM of Cobo came over to him and just started ripping him, right? And I don't know how they start talking, but they start talking about our bike show. So Mike ends up talking to him about the bike show, and we're like, in our minds, Cobo was a 5-year plan. We were like, one day we'll be at Cobo. A week later, we get a call from Cobo. And they're like, hey guys, we're in. And we're like, in on what? They're like, the show. Let's do it at Cobo. They're like, 60,000 square feet enough? We just went from like 3,000 square feet to 60,000 square feet. So now we're planning this huge mega show. We've got this huge mega ride going down, and all this craziness is happening. Then year 3 comes around, year 4, and we're grinding away at the show, and I'm getting all these phone calls from all these publicity people, and I'm really blowing them off because at this time I've done so much PR, I'm over it. So I get a call, and this lady's like, can you tell me the story of Slow Roll? So I'm like, yeah, it's this ride we started. Yeah, me and my friend, blah, 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 2,000 people, great, you're good to go. Next day, she calls me back, and she's like, would you mind telling that story to my boss? Sure. Slow rolls this, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for calling. Talk to you later. The next day they call, and this is real. The next day they call and they say, hey, would you mind doing that with a 6-person conference call? And that's when I said, who am I talking to right now? And they said, we're going to send you an NDA. And me being who I am, I'm like, send it. I didn't even know what an NDA was. I don't know if you guys know. A non-disclosure agreement, I didn't know. I'm like, send it. I'll sign it, whatever. So they send it to me, and that's when I look at it, and I see that it's Apple. And this is what I'm doing. So I sign it, and I send it back, and they say, you can't tell anybody, including your business partner. So that day, I call him, and I'm like, hey, let's hang out tonight. He's like, okay. So I'm like, actually, let's all hang out. On me. I'm like, let's all hang out. I'm buying. And everybody's like, what's going on? I'm like, can't tell you. A couple months. I'm like, enjoy it now. Enjoy it now. Maybe 3 weeks later, they were on the ground. Apple was at my house. We did 7 days of location scouting, and then we did 6 12-hour days of shooting, and then 1 14-hour day of shooting. It's all consecutive. The budget on that thing was almost a movie, a small movie. I only say that because I'm so proud of the fact that when they came to Detroit, they didn't come to change what people, they didn't say, okay, this is what we're doing. They came and they said, who are you? Who are your friends? What do you wear? Where do you go? Because this has to be authentic. And the production that we put together is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen about Detroit. So I'm incredibly proud about that. And I'm not telling you guys all this stuff because to brag. I mean, I am kind of bragging because but I'm telling you, we started this with Bikes and Murder t-shirts. When we put our first deposit down on Kobo, we put $267 each down. We've never cared about money. We've never cared about any of that. All we've cared about is the effect that we've made on everything. Detroit, we get to meet the mayor, and now we don't have to run from the cops anymore because we're partnered up with the police, and they escort us. But it's surreal to me to be here talking about it because I didn't call any major corporation or anybody. Everything we achieved was me calling you and you. It wasn't okay, who do I know at Mountain Dew? I mean, now we deal with these corporations, but we built that, the community. And that's our main mission is to, people ask me what I do, and I often say I'm a community engineer because what I like to do is have people come back into cities. Okay, people don't understand the beauty and the richness that exists within Detroit. So my job is to bring them here to show them that. But now, through what we've done with Apple, we're now in 12 cities. We're in 4 in Sweden, Berlin, London, Chicago, Cleveland, and we've been contacted by over 100 cities, including Paris, France, and Beijing, China. And they're not asking about bikes. They're asking about community and how they can apply what we've done here in Detroit. Well, I'm sorry, I'm in Canada, not here in Detroit. What we've done in Detroit to their cities. And that's what's the important thing about all this. I wish I had some formula or something, but it's really passion and connecting with people that are just as passionate. For the last 5 years, we've never made a dime. Literally. I bartend a couple days a week to pay my rent. But I would do this again and again and again because of this. So I hope I gave you guys a little bit of insight. Oh, let me tell you about the future before I go. I'm sorry, I'm holding your bar up. So with all this being said, I'm proud to announce, I don't know if you guys follow Detroit politics, but once again, coming from Bikes and Murder t-shirts, we just actually signed a deal with a group called the Union Joints to rehab a $50 million rehab of the original recreation center where Joe Louis learned how to box. And inside that, it's been vacant since the 80s, and we call the building the Spirit of Joe because, they've tried to take it down, and they can't. So it's amazing that we're in that. And the rest of the future is to do with you guys. We've been doing a lot of work with Windsor Eats and the University of Windsor to try to bring Slow Roll to Canada and close the ferry gap, and because you can't take bikes. So that's how far this has come. When we talk about evolution, We started this out literally trying to like make enough money to buy wine the next day. Now we're, speaking at schools and talking at TEDx's. So if you can take anything from what I brought to this other than my devastatingly good looks and my sharp humor, take away that all you need to do is reach out to your community to make things happen. Other things help, but that's where all this starts and that's where all this comes from. So thank you for letting me talk, and let's go to the bar.